Lena Matthews thought she was stepping into history. Amir El-Sayed believed he was destined to live forever. Karim Hassan carried the weight of too many buried secrets. Noura El-Fahmy craved power through devotion, and Detective Youssef Rahman hunted justice for his missing sister. But when their paths collided in Cairo, the desert revealed a nightmare of betrayal, sacrifice, and survival that no one could escape. Lena Matthews had always dreamed of uncovering hidden truths buried in history. At 27, she was already building a name for herself as an art historian specializing in ancient Egyptian rituals. Her research papers attracted attention in academic circles, but one email changed everything. It was from Amir El-Sayed, a wealthy Egyptian businessman with influence stretching across the Middle East. He praised her work and offered her something that seemed impossible: a chance to study artifacts locked away from the public eye, relics he claimed were part of his private collection. He described them as pieces that could redefine what scholars knew about the ancient world. To Lena, it felt like fate had chosen her. The invitation promised all expenses paid, exclusive access to his estate outside Cairo, and the possibility of co-authoring a groundbreaking book. Her friends and colleagues urged caution, pointing out how strange it was for a stranger to be so generous. But ambition drowned out her doubts. She convinced herself it was a legitimate opportunity, the kind that could cement her reputation forever. Lena booked her flight, packed her notebooks, and brushed aside an uneasy feeling that lingered in her chest. The moment she stepped onto the plane, she imagined doors opening to a future filled with discovery. What she could not imagine was the dark shadow hidden behind Amir's charm, nor the twisted obsession that drove him to seek her out. As the aircraft lifted into the clouds, Lena believed she was headed for the pinnacle of her career, yet in reality, she was flying straight into a nightmare designed with precision. The journey that began with excitement would end in terror, but at that moment, she could not see the storm waiting for her in Cairo. When Lena arrived in Cairo, the air felt thick with heat and mystery. Amir El-Sayed's world was unlike anything she had ever encountered. He greeted her at the airport with a convoy of black cars, his presence commanding immediate attention. Tall, immaculately dressed, and exuding confidence, Amir seemed to embody the role of a modern pharaoh he so proudly claimed. His eyes lingered on Lena as though she was already a possession rather than a guest. The drive to his estate revealed the extent of his wealth. Skyscrapers faded into desert outskirts, and soon Lena found herself approaching a sprawling mansion that looked more like a palace. Ancient statues lined the driveway, their stony gazes unsettling yet mesmerizing. At his side stood Karim Hassan, Amir's assistant. Karim was quiet, almost mechanical in his movements, yet Lena noticed his eyes never stopped scanning the surroundings. He acted less like a helper and more like a shadow, loyal and bound to Amir's every command. Inside the mansion, the atmosphere grew heavier. Marble floors gleamed beneath golden chandeliers, and the walls displayed artifacts Lena had only ever seen in textbooks. Amir's followers moved silently through the halls, some wearing elaborate jewelry, others masked as though preparing for a performance. Among them, one figure stood out: Noura El-Fahmy, tall and elegant, her expression unreadable. Lena caught her staring, as if sizing her up for some unspoken purpose. Amir introduced Lena as a chosen scholar, yet the reverence in the room suggested they saw her as something more. Lena tried to hide her unease behind polite smiles, but already she sensed she had entered a world built on secrets, a place where power and obsession ruled. Cairo had welcomed her, but Amir's realm felt like a trap disguised as paradise. Amir's mansion was less a home and more a labyrinth designed to impress and intimidate. From the moment Lena stepped inside, she felt dwarfed by towering statues of pharaohs and gods, their stone faces watching her every move. Corridors stretched endlessly, lined with ancient relics displayed like trophies, each piece gleaming under soft golden light. The air was scented with incense, heavy and almost suffocating, as if the house itself wanted to remind her of the rituals it once witnessed. Though Amir welcomed her warmly, there were areas he forbade her to enter. Certain doors remained locked, their handles cold when she brushed against them. At night, strange sounds drifted through the halls, low chanting, the shuffle of feet, and murmurs that seemed to come from behind the sealed rooms. Lena tried convincing herself they were rehearsals for historical ceremonies, but deep down, unease grew. Karim, always lingering nearby, gave nothing away. His silence was unsettling, his expression unreadable, yet his eyes often flickered toward her as if he knew what she was thinking. More unnerving was Noura El-Fahmy. Wherever Lena went, Noura seemed to appear, gliding through the mansion like a shadow. Her stare was cold, her presence deliberate, as though guarding something sacred from Lena's curiosity. Even during meals, when Amir spoke passionately about immortality and ancient kings, Noura's gaze never wavered. Lena should have felt honored to be in such a place, surrounded by priceless artifacts, but the atmosphere was suffused with menace. The mansion was beautiful, yet suffocating, every wall whispering secrets she wasn't meant to uncover. What had seemed like opportunity now felt like confinement. And though Lena hadn't yet discovered the truth behind the locked doors, her instincts screamed that inside them lay answers she was not meant to survive. The first time Lena witnessed one of Amir's private gatherings, she struggled to believe what she was seeing. The grand hall had been transformed into a ceremonial chamber, its walls draped with crimson fabric and lit only by flickering torches. Followers moved in silence, their faces hidden behind golden masks shaped like pharaohs and gods. The atmosphere was heavy with incense, the air almost vibrating with tension. At the center stood Amir, dressed in robes embroidered with hieroglyphs, his voice commanding as he recited words from ancient texts. Lena initially thought it was performance art, a theatrical reenactment for his wealthy friends. But the precision with which the rituals were carried out unsettled her. Every chant, every gesture, was performed with a devotion that went beyond mere spectacle. Noura El-Fahmy took on the role of high priestess, her movements deliberate and hypnotic as she guided the crowd through complex rituals. Her voice rose above the chants, sharp and unwavering, as though she were channeling something otherworldly. Lena watched, trying to suppress the growing unease in her chest. The followers bowed deeply before Amir, some trembling as if in the presence of a god. When Amir turned his attention to Lena, declaring her his chosen queen, the room erupted in renewed fervor. Lena froze, overwhelmed by the weight of their stares. She realized she was no longer just an observer, but a participant in something she could not understand. The masks, the firelight, the endless chanting, it all blurred into a scene that felt less like a performance and more like an initiation. Amir's words echoed in her mind, planting a seed of dread. If this was only the beginning, Lena feared what role she was truly meant to play in rituals that seemed carved out of ancient darkness. One restless night, Lena could no longer ignore her curiosity. While the mansion slept, she slipped from her room and followed the faint sound of footsteps down a forbidden corridor. The walls here were colder, the air damp and stale, as though untouched for years. At the end of the hallway, she found a door slightly ajar. Heart pounding, she pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, filled with shelves stacked high with clay jars. Each was labeled in careful handwriting, the inscriptions in both Arabic and English. As Lena examined them, her stomach twisted. Inside were human ashes. The realization struck like a blow. These were not artifacts, but evidence of death. Against the far wall, a collection of photographs had been pinned in neat rows. The faces were all young women, mostly foreigners, their smiles frozen in time. Lena leaned closer and gasped. Every woman bore a resemblance to her, Western, curious, drawn to Egypt under mysterious circumstances. Her hands shook as she noticed jewelry displayed beneath the photos, keepsakes taken like trophies. Among them was a silver bracelet engraved with the initials YF. She didn't know it yet, but it belonged to Detective Youssef Rahman's missing sister, a woman who had vanished years earlier. The weight of horror pressed down on Lena. Amir's promises of discovery had been nothing but bait, and she was his next victim. The chanting she had heard behind closed doors suddenly made sense. They were not harmless rituals, but ceremonies built on sacrifice. Lena stumbled back, trying to steady her breath, but footsteps echoed in the corridor. She fled before she was caught. The images burned into her mind. Now she knew the truth. Amir's world was not about history, but death disguised as legacy. From the moment Lena uncovered the hidden room, Amir's demeanor shifted. The charm he had once used to captivate her dissolved into suffocating control. Her passport disappeared from her luggage, and when she demanded an explanation, Amir brushed it off with a smile that chilled her. Soon after, her phone stopped working, and the Wi-Fi she once relied on was mysteriously disconnected. Every request to leave the estate was dismissed with vague promises of tomorrow. Guards now shadowed her every step, their presence a silent warning. The mansion, once overwhelming but fascinating, became a gilded cage. Karim Hassan's role also changed. Once a silent observer, he now followed Lena constantly, never far behind. Though he rarely spoke, Lena sensed conflict in his eyes, as though he carried a burden too heavy to reveal. Sometimes she caught him watching her with something that resembled pity, but his loyalty to Amir kept him silent. She dared not approach him for help, uncertain where his allegiance truly lay. Noura El-Fahmy, however, relished Lena's confinement. She appeared often, lingering in doorways with a faint smile, whispering veiled comments about queens and sacrifices. Her words dripped with menace, convincing Lena that Noura saw her not as a guest, but as an offering. Every glance from Noura felt like a judgment, every smile like a threat. The rituals continued, and Amir increasingly placed Lena at the center. She was dressed in elaborate gowns, paraded before masked followers, and praised as though she were already immortalized. On the surface, it was theatrical, but Lena knew the truth hidden beneath the spectacle. Each day drew her deeper into Amir's world. An escape seemed impossible. She was no longer a scholar chasing history. She was prey caught in the web of a man who believed himself untouchable. The night Amir announced the final ritual, Lena felt the air in the mansion grow heavier, as though the walls themselves understood what awaited her. Black SUVs lined the courtyard, engines humming while masked followers filed inside. Lena was placed in the back seat, flanked by guards, with Karim sitting silently across from her. Amir rode ahead in another car, his confidence radiating through every movement. Noura El-Fahmy sat beside him, her face partially hidden beneath a golden mask, her posture rigid with anticipation. The convoy left the lights of Cairo behind, plunging into the vast emptiness of the desert. Hours passed as sand stretched endlessly under the glow of the moon. Lena pressed her hands against the window, her heart pounding faster with each mile. When the vehicles finally stopped, torches were already lit, arranged in perfect circles around a half-excavated tomb. The ruins rose from the sand like a scar from the past, jagged and silent, waiting for what was to come. Followers stepped out, forming a line as Amir emerged in his ceremonial robes. His voice carried through the dry air, proclaiming that this night would mark his ascension. Noura moved with him, her every gesture precise, her eyes locked on Lena as though she were already a sacrifice prepared. The chanting began, deep and rhythmic, echoing across the desert. Lena was pulled from the car and led toward the center of the torchlit circle. She stumbled on the sand, her throat dry, but there was no mercy in the hands that gripped her arms. The atmosphere felt ancient, as though time itself had been bent backward. Surrounded by fire, masks, and unshakable devotion, Lena realized the truth. This was not theater. This was the beginning of her end. The desert night pulsed with firelight as Amir raised his arms to the sky, his voice booming over the rhythmic chants of his followers. The torches flickered in unison, casting long shadows across the sand. Lena was dragged to the stone sarcophagus at the center of the circle, its surface carved with hieroglyphs that glowed faintly in the fire's reflection. She struggled against the grip of masked devotees, but their strength overpowered her. Every cry she made was swallowed by the relentless chanting. Amir proclaimed that Lena was the vessel of eternity, his chosen queen who would secure his place beyond death. His words rolled through the air with the certainty of a man who believed himself invincible. Noura El-Fahmy stepped forward, her mask gleaming, her hands steady as she sprinkled sand over Lena's head. She moved with the solemnity of a priestess fulfilling a sacred duty, her expression cold with zeal. The sarcophagus lid was lifted, heavy and ominous. Lena's heart pounded as she was forced inside, the stone walls pressing against her body. She screamed until her voice cracked, but the chanting grew louder, drowning out her desperation. The lid closed above her, plunging her into suffocating darkness. Sand poured over the coffin, muffling every sound, sealing her fate grain by grain. Inside, Lena thrashed, her fingernails scraping the stone, her lungs burning for air. The heat rose, the weight above crushing her spirit. Outside, Amir and his followers roared in triumph, convinced the ritual had bound their leader to immortality. Noura's voice rose above them all, triumphant and unwavering. Beneath the desert floor, Lena's strength ebbed as silence closed in, her mind slipping between terror and unconsciousness. The world faded, leaving only darkness and the chilling certainty of death. The desert was silent after the ritual ended, the followers dispersing under Amir's command. The torches burned low, their flames licking the night air before sputtering out one by one. Lena lay inside the sarcophagus, her breath shallow, consciousness slipping away. Hours passed before footsteps returned. It was Karim Hassan, moving cautiously, his face stripped of its usual coldness. His hands trembled as he dug into the sand, shoving it aside until the stone lid became visible. Sweat ran down his face as he forced it open, revealing Lena's pale, gasping form. She clung to life by a thread, her chest rising in shallow bursts. Karim whispered words she barely heard, his voice breaking as he admitted he could no longer bear the weight of Amir's cruelty. He confessed that countless women had died in the same way, buried alive to serve Amir's twisted obsession with immortality. His loyalty had bound him for years, but Lena's suffering had pushed him to the edge. Yet even in this moment of defiance, he remained a coward. He could not fight Amir openly, nor could he return Lena to the mansion. Instead, he chose a half measure, freeing her from the coffin but abandoning her in the vast desert. Lena reached out weakly, but Karim stepped back, his eyes filled with guilt. He told her survival was now in her hands, then disappeared into the night, his figure swallowed by the dunes. Lena lay in the sand, too weak to move at first, her body trembling with exhaustion. Above her, the stars stretched endlessly, cold and indifferent. She was alive, but barely, stranded miles from safety. Her only companions were the silence of the desert and the haunting memory of chance that still echoed in her mind. The first rays of dawn spread across the desert as Lena dragged herself through the sand, her throat raw, her skin scorched by the cold of night and the creeping heat of morning. Each movement was agony, yet survival pushed her forward. Hours blurred into one another until a group of nomads spotted her collapsed near the edge of their camp. They carried her to safety, giving her water and alerting authorities. Word of her survival reached Detective Youssef Rahman, a Cairo investigator haunted by the unsolved disappearance of his younger sister. When Lena described the photographs, the ashes, and the silver bracelet marked with the initials YF, Youssef knew with crushing certainty that his sister had been one of Amir's victims. Driven by grief and fury, Youssef launched an immediate raid on Amir's mansion. Police stormed the estate, only to find it abandoned. The halls were stripped bare, relics and masks gone, as though the followers had vanished overnight. No ashes, no photographs, no signs of the secret rooms remained. It was as if the horrors Lena described had been swallowed by the desert itself. Despite Lena's testimony, without physical evidence the investigation stalled. Amir El-Sayed, Noura El-Fahmy, and their devoted circle were nowhere to be found. Karim, too, disappeared without leaving a trace. Lena returned to London, her body healed, but her mind scarred by the memories of that night. She told her story publicly, hoping to warn others, but whispers persisted that Amir's cult still operated in the shadows. Some claimed to have seen masked figures near desert ruins, while others spoke of new disappearances linked to foreign visitors. For Lena, the nightmare never truly ended. The world believed her tale, yet the modern Pharaoh remained a phantom, free, untouchable, and always searching for his next queen.